Mr. Jayadev Galla, great to have you with us here on CNBC TV18 and good to meet you here in Hyderabad on the eve of what is all set to be your big Gigafactory launch. And there's been so much talk about this given that there's so much been spoken of in terms of the future of electric vehicles, mobility and the power of it thereof. So for the sake of our viewers, could you break this down for me? What exactly will the Gigafactory be all about and what kind of a timeline are we looking at till it hits its optimum capacity?
So we're doing it in phases, basically. We've announced an eventual capacity of 16 gigawatt hours. That's what we've estimated and committed to the government in Telangana. In the first phase, which we're launching, we're going to be inaugurating tomorrow actually, is the pack facility. The first phase of the pack facility. Eventually, we're going to have about 5 gigawatt hours of cell pack making and 16 gigawatt hours of cell manufacturing.
Right.
So the first phase of the cell manufacturing will be seeing coming online in somewhere between April to June of 2025. And we expect to get to the final 16 gigawatt hour capacity by end of FY27.
Right. And all these plans actually mean that you've actually reported a really good set of Q1 numbers for FY25. Both profits and revenue have seen healthy growth and a significant spike. What will be Amara Raja Energy and Mobility's key growth driver as far as this fiscal and the medium term is concerned? What are you banking on really for growth?
So Amara Raja Energy and Mobility is what was formerly known as Amara Raja Batteries. It's not a new company. It's a new name for the existing publicly traded company. And the reason we decided to make that change is because we're expanding to beyond just being batteries, but playing different roles in both the energy space and the mobility space. So in addition to getting into new chemistries, we're planning on getting into new geographies with existing products as well as new products. And we're also getting into the power electronics side, so making the charging stations and those type of products to start with. And we're contemplating on possibly getting into some services as well going forward. I wouldn't be able to elaborate too much on that right now.
But more or less, these will be your key growth drivers, you reckon, in this new avatar of the company?
Yeah, so we're investing nearly 9,500 crores for the lithium cell making facility that we've already announced. But we're expecting that over the next several years, we're going to be investing a significant amount, even to expand our global presence in the lead acid space. The way things are moving today, if you look at North America and Western Europe, the adoption of EV is actually slowing down because the business model that they started with doesn't seem to be the one that's going to work. China, on the other hand, has reached a stage where they're selling more EVs than regular vehicles. I think just last week they announced that more than the majority of the vehicles they're selling today are electric and not ICE engine. Because their business model is working, which means smaller cars, smaller batteries, lower cost, faster recharge time. These are the kind of things that are working in China. Whereas the West went with high luxury performance vehicles like Porsches, Land Rovers, with huge batteries, and the cars, they have to pay a significant premium over the ICE vehicles to get them. So I think India is going to be more like the Chinese market. It's going to be light mobility that works here and penetrates well, starting with two-wheelers and three-wheelers, and then getting into small cars, not necessarily the performance and high-end vehicles.
And that's the way to go, no doubt, and it's also in line with what a lot of people have been speaking about in terms of how the Indian market has a clear differentiator. What does this do to your revenue outlook for FY25? I know it may be too soon to talk about how all these plans may have an impact on your revenue, but for the current fiscal, what is your outlook on the revenue front?
Well, current fiscal, we're just entering into the EV segment. So it's more about investments rather than revenue at the moment. We are making a decent amount of revenue. In fact, one of our OE customers is one of our largest customers now across all different application areas. Even compared to our lead acid customers, this one customer has already become our second largest customer. So more and more are going to be added like that. So I think this next few years is going to be more about how much are we investing and how we're going to cover those the fixed costs that get attached to that. It's going to be probably a few more years before you start seeing the real return coming in from those investments.
And that 9,500 crore aside, is there a ballpark figure in terms of how much you would like to invest in a space that you are clearly interested and invested in?
Beyond that, you mean?
Yes.
I think the sky is the limit in that sense, because it's not just about the Indian market, but the global market too. once we reach those type of capacities, we should be able to compete with the best in the world.
Right. On the product front, just a little while ago, G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant said that as far as stationary charging stations are concerned, there could be a fledgling market that's all set to grow, and that more OEMs should perhaps look to invest in this space. So on that front, are there product diversification plans that you're looking at?
Charging stations, I'm not really worried about. When the demand picks up, it's very easy to roll them out very quickly. Doesn't cost a lot of money, doesn't require a lot of space. It goes into existing, parking lots, office complexes, movie theaters, residential complexes. These are the kind of places you're going to be seeing charging centers. You don't have to set up like you have gas stations. You don't have to have a separate location to set up a charging center because you don't have the tanks, you don't have the filling of the tanks. All you need is an electrical connection.
Absolutely.
Right? So you can set up a charging center anywhere and they'll proliferate very quickly.
Right. No doubt. And even as you have these product diversification plans and you're looking to get into newer segments, even as you set aside newer investments, what do you make of the headwinds that exist as far as the sector is concerned? There's been so much talk about how China has already hit over capacity in terms of having more manufacturing capacity than the demand that actually exists in the global market. Do you feel that this possible price war with China could have an adverse impact on the ecosystem here, your business included? Is that likely to impact the kind of business that you do here?
This has to be handled by the government policy. I think initially when nobody's making cells in India, having a more liberal import policy to get the industry started is useful. But as we start having the capability to manufacture, until we get to a global scale where we can be competitive, we're going to need some protection.
Right.
And I think the government is quite well aware of that. And I'm confident that they're going to move in that direction.
Dare I say you're proposing protectionist measures, much like an anti-dumping duty of sorts?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you feel the time is ripe to actually bring about...
Time is not right now. The time is right when we have when we have some capacity available in the country, that would be the right time.
So we're thinking 3 years, 4 years?
2 years, capacity? 2 years.
All right, and that would be the time for an anti-dumping duty on Chinese products.
Yes.
Fair enough, but I also have to ask you, speaking of China itself, the battery manufacturing ecosystem there is seeing present-day capacities, like we're saying, that is twice of the existing demand. Do you feel here in India as well, we might need to take a lesson or two from what's happening there, given the fact that you're seeing multiple players? Exide is also shaping up and shoring up on its battery pack manufacturing. Ola Electric is also traversing the same route. You're looking to get a battery packs as well. Does India run the risk of overcapacitating itself, much like China is doing right now? Is there a risk that you feel the industry here might have to contend with?
Not at the moment. I don't see that risk, because if you look at what the planned investments are, they're not going to meet the planned demand. So there's room for more. And when you say battery pack is different from cell,
right?
We have to differentiate this. Battery pack, you can buy cells from anywhere and then put them together as a pack. That doesn't require a lot of investment. It's only assembly. You don't have to make anything. You're buying everything and then putting it together. Right. So whereas a cell requires huge amount of capex. It's where you're getting into the electrochemical side of things. So you have the process industry side of it, and then you have the assembly after that.
Right.
So that's where you have to watch how many people are actually investing. You had this euphoria when the PLI scheme was first introduced, where a huge number of companies that we never even heard of before, or who had never even heard of a battery maybe, were suddenly wanting to get into this industry because it looked like a good industry to get into.
Right.
Not for any other reason. But then at the end of the day, you look at who's actually making progress, who's actually putting money behind, not just getting into making packs, but actually getting into making cells. It's a very small number, which we are included in that small group of people. I won't say the others' names right now.
Right.
But these are the people that are serious about actually getting into cells. I think everybody else doesn't have the capability, doesn't have the knowledge, and doesn't have the motivation at the moment, at least.
But should competition arise in this space, and it probably will, it doesn't concern you since you feel there's ample space to grow in keeping with present-day demand?
Yes.
All right. But I also have to ask you, there's been so much talk and so much concern about the value chain that exists as far as batteries is concerned in the Indian market. The supply chain here still is 70% reliant on imports, and that places a very low value on the kind of, on the kind of clout the supply chain here holds for itself. Is that another headwind that you might consider a bit of an irritant even as you look to grow business?
Most of the materials we're going to have to import. And I think sourcing the minerals, getting the supply chain ready to be able to, for us to have access to that supply chain. Government, that's a bigger role that the government has to play. On the one side, giving us some incentives and hand-holding is good, but on the other side, actually going out and securing the supply chain the way the Chinese government has done for their companies, or by incentivizing us to go and do that, would definitely help, and I think it's required also.
Right.
If you look at it today, China doesn't own 80% of the minerals, but they're processing 80% of the minerals,
right,
regardless of where it's coming from. So that's all because of the way the government has moved.
I mean, you talk about incentivizing supply chain. Are there certain solutions that you think might help manufacturers?
Investing into mining, investing into refining. If you want private sector to make those investments, you have to provide some incentives for that. Yes.
Mr. Galla, do you foresee a timeline where we can be less reliant on these imports as far as the supply chain for batteries is concerned?
I think as the product proliferates in the market, then more and more of the minerals can be recycled and reused. When that critical mass is achieved, then the import requirement comes down drastically.
Right.
Just to give you an example, like lead acid, when we first entered into lead acid batteries, we were importing almost all of our lead because we needed pure lead and we weren't getting the quality that we needed in India, and the recyclers weren't able to recycle it to that quality. But today I think about 80% of our lead, we're buying recycled lead in India.
Right.
Because technology has improved, people have improved, the whole supply chain has improved.
Right.
So in lithium-ion also, when you get enough batteries actually working out there to actually be able to run a recycling system, then we'll actually start using more and more recycled materials rather than having to import virgin materials.
So give it half a decade, I'm guessing, before we can be less import reliant, you'd reckon?
Maybe a decade.
A decade before we get there. All right. Before we end, I have to ask you, one recent piece of news that got the markets excited vis-a-vis Amara Raja was that the partnership with Ather, which you would see you supplying, battery to them. It is part of a strategic partnership as well. What are we talking here? What's that order book like? What do we look forward to on that front?
Well, I can't talk about order book and all of that, and I think Ather is also continuing to grow quite substantially. So past doesn't reflect the future in this sense.
All right.
But Ather is the third large OE that we are working with, and we're a developmental partner with them. So which means we're not just supplying a product, but we're actually working with them to design products which are suitable for them, and possibly even guiding them on what type of products to choose.
Right, all right. Before I let you go, I have to ask you, you recently said farewell to one part of your career, the political side, to focus entirely on heading the Amara Raja group. What's that innings been like? I know it's a going back of sorts to something you used to do before becoming a politician, but you feel free of one side of the burden that you've had to shoulder as both industrialist and politician. Do you miss that side of things, perhaps?
Well, I think considering the results, there was definitely a bit of FOMO.
I can imagine.
Which I think I'm over now, because my reasons are still valid. I think whatever reasons I had for stepping out of politics to focus on business have not changed. So I'm happy with my decision still. All
right, sounds good. On that note, thank you so much for doing this. I wish you all the very best for the new Gigafactory, and I hope it goes well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.